Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive videos, I'm going to explore the astrology of December 2023. First of all, I'm going to give you some standout details to look out for. And you can also check out your deep dive zodiac sign forecast from Aries through to Pisces by seeing the link beneath this video. I'll also put the links for year 2024's videos too. Now this month begins with the Sun, Mars and initially Mercury in the sign of Capricorn, but later on the 1st, Mercury is going to be moving, but it is in a pre-retrograde shadow, so just be conscious of that. Neptune is also set to be a massive influence this month. She does go forwards on the 6th after tracking backwards for 22.5 weeks, but she's tangling with the new moon, which occurs across the 12th or the 13th of December, depending on where you live. Mercury also goes retrograde on the 13th. We have an incredibly supercharged opposition between Venus and Uranus in the run-up to Christmas itself from the 18th to the 23rd. Very exciting if you're looking for a bit of festive pash, but it also could cause some tension if perhaps you and yours see things a little bit differently when it comes to the budget. Of course, the 22nd sees the winter solstice. This is an incredibly important event in Western tropical astrology. It ushers in cardinal quadrant 4, the last of the quarters of the year, which takes us all the way up to the spring equinox. So the next 13 weeks is very much about understanding how we're shaping up in terms of the culmination in our physical world. And of course, Pluto's been influencing this sign since 2008, so can't wait to share that with you. Now, Mercury's going to be rewinding back into Sagittarius on the 23rd, but then we have the full moon, which occurs on the 27th, and that is in the sign of Gemini. So what is that going to tell us? Because Neptune is up to mischief there as well. But also on the 27th, we have an absolutely sensational link between Jupiter and the Sun. It's a trine, both in Earth signs, Jupiter in retrograde through to the 31st, but still this gives us a huge sense of hopefulness as we come into the end of the year. And it's also true that Jupiter and Saturn are forging a great link in the last 2 weeks of this year, which in fact will go on through to the 25th of March 2024. If you think about it, Jupiter is the greater benefic and Saturn the greater malefic. So how's that going to play out? I can't wait to share that with you too. So much exciting information to share. Please stay with me for more. So year 2024 is nearly upon us. If you'd like to understand what that will mean for you as an individual, based on your personal astrology, not on your zodiac sign, if you give me your unique birth data, I can prepare for you your transit forecast. If you order it in 2023, I'll give you the rest of this year free. And also in my special package, you'll get your character analysis, your life roadmap, which will help you to get a much more intimate understanding of the patterns that have played out in your life thus far and how you can work with them. But in addition, you'll get your free zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs written, also Chinese and also Vedic. And they come in the package when I send it to you by email. Please see the link below for more. So as we burst our way into December, so the Sun and Mars are still pretty close together in the sign of Sagittarius. If you recall, when they moved on the 22nd and the 24th of November respectively, they were immediately obstructed by the rather abrasive energies and restrictive energies of Saturn. So we didn't really get the uplift from that Sagittarius energy as we might hope we could. But Mercury moves from Sagittarius later on the Monday, but in fact has actually been in its pre-retrograde shadow for the last week of November. So if you have started to experience some misunderstandings or tangles, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. Mercury moving into the sign of Capricorn is very businesslike. If there is something that you want to achieve before the year ends, in terms of a job application, perhaps in terms of doing some kind of business presentation, having an important meeting, then Mercury moving into this location, despite the pre-retrograde shadow, can be helpful. But the Sun has moved on from Mars somewhat, but there's still that echo. And I love Mars being in Sagittarius because, of course, it sub-rules the second decan of this sign. So it does bring a sense of anticipation. But on the 4th, Venus moves out of its transition through the lovely sign of Libra for Venus, because, of course, it rules that sign. And that's very much about diplomacy and harmony. But its move into the sign of Scorpio on the 4th is asking us, what did the words that have been said to me really mean? So it's not just about the conversation, it is about deciphering the true meaning. Technically, Venus is debilitated in the sign of Scorpio, and it can be a little bit jealous in this sign, but also it can make us much more conscious of who we really desire. And in the run-up to Christmas, if there has been someone that you have found rather enticing, has some kind of magnetic energy around them, that can be amped up with this transition. But of course, Venus is also about money, and the sign of Scorpio is about longer term loot. So it's a time when we're being obviously asked to think about gifting to people, and we want to do our best for people, but perhaps this is also just reminding us to stay within the boundaries we feel comfortable with. But on the 6th, Neptune ends a long retrograde which began on the 30th of June, and that 22.5 weeks has not always been very easy. Because Saturn moved into the sign of Pisces on the 7th of March, as planets have moved into angles with the sign of Pisces, squares and oppositions, first of all they've been contacted by Saturn in that more restrictive manner, and then by Neptune in that more dissipating and confusing and sometimes draining way. So I think a lot of people have actually been finding energy has been at a premium over the last few months. But on the 12th we have the new moon. It's the 13th in some parts of the world, Johannesburg, New Delhi and Sydney. But certainly in terms of Los Angeles, New York and London, it's the 12th. And this combination does see Mars still in touch with the Sun and the Moon. And if we think about it, the Moon in the sign of Sagittarius is pushing us to be more independent, more aware of our need for a little bit of space and freedom. But equally, there is a right angle with Neptune, which is very, very complex, but there's even an even tighter quincunx with Uranus. So I think collectively what we can take from this is that when it comes to sensitivities, they are likely to be amplified over the following month. Even things that we'd normally perhaps shrug off, because after all, Sagittarius is a happy-go-lucky sign. It is very curious, it likes to investigate, loves knowledge, and in a way this combination with Mars in the mix is perfect for the festivities, particularly if you're wanting to travel somewhere. But Neptune is really, really tightly in a right angle to the Sun and the Moon. So just be conscious of that there could be some perhaps confusion around family matters, but because Neptune is in the 12th collective house, any fears and worries can be ramped up because of that more passionate energy of the Sun and the Moon and Mars in Sagittarius. But as I mentioned, Uranus is in a quincunx, that's 150 degrees in house 2. So that's the one that really could push us to go outside what we've really committed to do when it comes to our expenditure. So Uranus can be a very impulsive influence. The ninth house doesn't like restrictions, likes to be very free to do as it wants. And with Mars there as well, that brings a more rebellious spirit to that particular quincunx. So in fact, it's a very, very complex new moon and does need handling with care. It's at 20 degrees, so if you've got any mutable planets between around about 17 and 23 degrees, whether it is in Pisces, Gemini, Virgo or Sagittarius, you are going to be influenced by this event a lot more. But the 13th sees Mercury go into its retrograde. Retrogrades have an interesting profile. Some astrologers will push back a little bit, to be honest, and I actually really agree with them that we can't automatically create a mindset that things will definitely go wrong, because then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And because we have at least 3 retrogrades each year, the whole season takes 10 weeks. So that's 30 weeks, including the shadow periods, when things are going to go disastrously wrong, yeah? Well, things do go wrong in life. We do have those times when big banking systems ruled by Mercury will suddenly not work and we can't get our money out or can't get our statements, or our internet goes down, or a computer that's been a faithful servant suddenly gives up the ghost. And of course we can all blame it on Mercury, and we often do. And Mercury, whether it's in shadow or retrograde, can cause snags. There is absolutely no doubt about that. But what we can do is use the retrograde to revisit the part of our existence that perhaps needs some tightening up. So it depends on your zodiac sign. As I mentioned, please see your deep dive individual zodiac sign beneath this video. But what I would say in the sign of Capricorn, it may be that when it comes to the professional world, there may be something that slows, reaches some kind of inhibition or buffer, but it doesn't mean to say that we can't learn something or adapt in some way. So for example, if we found our business interests have been a little bit tested by the retraction in finances that's gone on over the last year or so, then Mercury is asking us to come up with new, fresh ways of trying to find sources of income to support ourselves. But the 18th to the 23rd could be very interesting when it comes to money, because the clash between Venus and Uranus is so electric, it can really push us to be much more in the moment when it comes to resources. And although Uranus is in house 2, everyday money, and Venus in 8, longer term finances, I feel that Uranus's own rebelliousness can say, look, if I want to splash out on this particular person with a surprise and rather unusual with Uranus gift or surprise gift, then I'm going to do it. But the important thing with Venus and Uranus, if you are single and you do encounter someone at some kind of festive gathering that you do find is very, very interesting and exciting, it's important to understand what the terms of reference are. Now, you don't have to have a business meeting to discuss these. Usually we can find out within a few minutes where someone is, what their position is. So if you're someone who's looking for a little bit of a clinch under the mistletoe, but that's all you want, you're likely to say that. But it's also possible that you could suddenly find yourself compelled to get extremely close and involved with someone because of Venus being in Scorpio. That's where we're most invested. But equally, it could see us absolutely, totally compelled to escape someone that we feel is being too clingy. So that's an interesting one when it comes to perhaps longer standing relationships, whether it's with friendships, colleagues, or in a romantic dimension. Venus opposite Uranus can create attraction but also disassociation, and it just depends on the circumstances. One thing it will create is perhaps a little bit of tension, but sometimes romantic tension can lead to some exciting outcomes. Sometimes we can end up at either end of the settee and not speaking much. But the winter solstice on the 22nd, a hugely important event in Western tropical astrology, because Western tropical astrology is based on the fixed seasons. And this is something that particularly the media just do not understand. And obviously that when they attack Western tropical astrology, how can it be right? Because of the tilt of the earth, the precession of the equinoxes, there's a 24-degree difference circa between where everything really is, Vedic, and where Western tropical astrology says it really is. Well, it's because our system is based on the seasons. And a further confusion comes from the fact that we have the Julian and Gregorian calendars, which don't align to the Western tropical calendar, which begins around the 20th or the 21st of March with the vernal equinox. So this event on the 22nd sees the sun move back to the lovely Capricorn, which is very much to do with celebrating traditions. And in terms of the festivities, maybe it can make us very nostalgic for people who can't be with us, but also it encourages us to enjoy, the more earthy parts of this part of the year. If we can have a neighbour in for a cup of tea and a mince pie, perhaps someone who lives on their own, that kind of fraternity is absolutely lovely. It may seem to be a little bit paternalistic, but kindness is what it's all about. But the 23rd, ironically, sees Mercury inverting back into the sign of Sagittarius. So if you have been discussing something about a business matter, it wouldn't also be a surprise if there was something to do with some new skills that need to be learned, or perhaps some travel involved in work. Or if you are actually travelling, it's important to make sure that all the details are really sharp. And obviously at this time of year, a lot of people do get away from home, whether it's off to see relatives or for some winter snow or some summer sun. So vitally important to make sure that the last week of this year, you're really on the ball when it comes to precision. And that's where we can manage Mercury retrograde, because we can't control all of it. If air traffic controllers decide to go on strike, or train drivers, or a port gets blockaded somewhere, which often happens with Mercury retrograde, that's because people are staging some kind of industrial action. It's not what we're personally doing, but what we can do is try to anticipate that these things might happen and make sure that we've got a survival kit with us that can help us if we do get stuck for a few hours in a way that we don't really want. Now, the 25th, of course, is Christmas Day. Have a lovely time. And I always say that I think of people who will be on their own on Christmas Day. But someone did write in and say, but I'll be on my own and that's what I choose and I'm fine with it. And I really respect that. If you're on your own on Christmas Day and it's not so much your choice, you will be particularly in my thoughts. But if you are on your own and it is your choice, you'll be in my thoughts too. But for everyone, have a super Christmas Day. But on that day, the moon's in the bubbly Gemini. It can be a little irreverent, great fun, bit mischievous, but it's squaring with Neptune. So Neptune, again, is showing just how influential it can be, despite the fact that it goes forwards on the 6th. Also, in the last week of this month, Neptune is going to be squaring up to the combination between Mercury and Mars, which come into alignment as this year comes to a close. So the desire to do something more spontaneous is really going to be very strong, because Mercury's not at its best in Sagittarius, of course, it's debilitated, but Mars can bring an extra dimension of impatience. And if we feel penned in and it just all feels like we need some escapism, that combination can really see us do something quickly to create some drama. But they are squared by Neptune. And because Neptune can be brilliant for movies and the spiritual dimension, or escaping to the coast or into countryside for some very peaceful walks, that's all good. But Neptune, of course, can also skew our reality. So because the sign of Sagittarius is about big ideas and philosophy, it's entirely possible that there will be some feisty arguments going on between Christmas and New Year, where you may encounter someone who sees something very, very differently, but as far as you or they're concerned, one of you has all the facts wrong. So important, if you are going to have some kind of ardent discussion, that you are really informed on the details. So that brings us to the 27th, and we have the full moon in the sign of Cancer. The great thing about this full moon is the moon rules the sign of Cancer, but the sun in the sign of Capricorn, both the moon and the sun are influenced by a terrific angle between Jupiter and Saturn. Now that develops the last 2 weeks of this year, but it's going to go on, as I mentioned before, through to the 25th of March next. So Jupiter's about growth, Saturn can be about restraint and restriction, so they balance each other out. But because Saturn is in a watery sign and Jupiter is in an earth sign, earth carries water really well. So for example, in order to have a fire, you need air. So air and fire are compatible, and water and earth are compatible because the earth carries the water in that riverbed, and that works very well. And because Jupiter is in an earth sign, in the sign of Taurus, angling back to the sun on the 27th in an exact trine. So that works into this particular full moon. So as much as the new moon can be quite challenging on the 12th, 13th, the full moon on the 27th is blessed with lots of opportunity. And what Saturn does is it anchors the more extravagant and sometimes quick to promise more than it can realistically deliver energies of Jupiter, which, to be fair to Taurus is a good host for Jupiter, slows it down a little bit, and of course it is in retrograde. On the 29th, however, Venus escapes what could be the psychodrama of its transit through Scorpio. Of course, it could be where people feel very passionate about things, and some people are definitely going to have a very spicy Christmas day or Christmas festive period, and it will be more than the mulled wine. But Venus moving into Sagittarius is very much about the truth. So then we get Venus, the retreating Mercury, and Mars all in a lineup in the sign of Sagittarius as we bring the curtain down on this year. And then on the 31st, the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, ends its 4-month retrograde, and that timing is absolutely impeccable to take us into the new year. But of course Mercury is still in a retrograde, so it's an exciting month. But I think one of the dimensions is that the Sagittarius energy is about expansion, travel, excitement, freedom, independence. The Neptunian energy is very much about what we don't necessarily see. So it can be our shadow side, it can be our fears and anxieties, it can be our dreams that sometimes haunt our days if we have a bad one. It's not necessarily a tangible energy, but what it can do is exacerbate sensitivities which are not being worked out. But then again, Sagittarius has a penchant for getting to the truth of things, and can be very determined in that regard. And if we can have a complete change of scene, that's going to be an ace thing to do this month. But that lovely Capricornian energy that comes in with the winter solstice, and obviously we are going to have that moon energy, which is really influenced by the ruler of Capricorn, Saturn, and that is a very stabilizing link too. But we still have that Sagittarius energy. So if you're wanting to go to a New Year's Eve party, it could be that an invitation comes completely out of the blue and you end up talking, those conversations you have at parties where people are sat up the stairs, never met each other before, and suddenly they're talking about quantum physics. Well, I'm not. I'll probably be talking about the prospects of my football team, but you get my drift. You can have those very unusual conversations at parties that actually can be great fun, and we are all going to encounter people who could challenge us in some ways. I feel challenge our outlook, but it can be good for us as long as we're open to it. And as the curtain comes down on the year, Jupiter direct, we'll take that all day long. I'd like to wish you a very happy Christmas and New Year, and please remember that you can watch your deep dive individual zodiac forecast from Aries through to Pisces for December or year 2024 by seeing underneath this video. But for now, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure being with me. I'd be grateful for your likes, comments, shares and subscriptions.